Our worship theme this month is Christianity and climate change. And when in a community like ours, we embrace science and the scientific community's conclusions, and the scientists have done their job. Al Gore did his job. Is Al Gore still alive? I can't imagine what he's feeling these days, because it felt like we were going to get somewhere. And here we still are. I think much of where we've gone wrong as people of faith is we have left this problem, this crisis, in the scientific and activist realms. We have not treated this as a deeply spiritual, theological problem. And I think there's many issues, racism, sexism, homophobia, that are deeply spiritual problems that require spiritual solutions. And by spiritual problems, it's not good spirituality. It's a harmful theology that informs the way people behave. And more often than not, folks have a preconceived notion about who they like and who they don't like, and then they twist. They twist and interpret things accordingly and say, God wants you to hate the same people I hate. Now, our reading from today, Genesis chapter 3, the Garden of Eden, is a marvelous text. I love this passage. There is so much in here. Wondrous, sacred, inspiring, but it's become harmfully twisted. Now, I'm guessing more than one of you here have heard different interpretations of Genesis 3, and I want to kind of do a quick survey. What in Genesis 3 have you heard this is what Genesis 3 is about? Just raise your hand. Well, I know more than one of you. Regina. Women cause sin. Yeah. It's so ridiculous to have that conclusion. Yes. Original sin. Right. And when you put those two together and you blame women for original sin, creation is fallen. Mm-hmm. The fall is how this passage is referred to sometimes. Any others? Rosie. Being expelled from the garden. Yes. There's a lot in here that has gone wrong. I mean, blaming women for sin is so ridiculously absurd. And most of this comes from this literalistic approach to a story that has a talking snake. If a talking snake isn't a sign that this is an allegory, this is a parable to teach a lesson about the human experience and condition, I'm not sure what to do for you. Now, is it possible that there was a time when snakes could talk? Maybe. The animals in my house talk. They do. We have full-on conversations with them, and they're not pretty, because some of those animals have really mean personalities. The thing is, original sin isn't found in the Bible. It's not. It's not found in Judaism, was not and is not found in Eastern or Eastern Orthodox Christianities. Original sin is not in the early writings of the Greek or Latin church thinkers, not until Augustine of Hippo around the year 400 CE when he proposed the idea of original sin. So Christianity had been around for a little while, and as most movements, they're trying to figure things out along the way, and Augustine of Hippo's like, well, how do I help explain our situation? And so original sin enters his mind, and then he uses, obviously, the sacred text to try to get that to fit, and then we sort of ran wild with it. Now, the fancy word for the essence of his teaching, and I'm going to butcher this, but it's concupiscence, an ardent, usually sensual longing, the inborn tendency of humans to sin. And because of this, because we have been indoctrinated with this idea that we are sin, even those of you that don't believe it have been affected by it. Even if you didn't grow up in a household or a church that taught that, you've been affected by it because you're surrounded by people who are hurt and informed by it in very profound ways. And it's no wonder to me that we as a collective species find it hard to have healthy self-love. And therefore, how do we love our neighbors as we love ourselves? Our theology matters, friends. Fortunately, there are a lot of really wonderful interpretations of Genesis 3, less popular, less widely accepted. And one of the threads from Genesis 3, interpretive threads that heavily informs my theology, is this thread of interpretation that centers on human development. Now, our development as individuals and as relational units, societies, our human development provides the foundation from which all our actions spring. Survival, party planning, climate change and the climate crisis. So let's re-enter the garden. As best you can, leave the baggage outside. Enter the garden with wonder and awe. This place, Eden, is lush, and it's safe, and you can play with tigers and swim with dolphins and frolic all day and never do any work, never do anything that is hard. This, in so many ways, is what childhood should be. Safe, glorious. Each day an opportunity for unencumbered adventures with plentiful food, clean water, and the friendship of all living and non-living things. But then we grow up a little bit, and we realize that not all tigers are safe to play with, even the little mini ones that we've domesticated. A friend gets hurt swimming with dolphins one day, and you begin to notice that tending the garden is a lot of work. Work that was once invisible to you. Men, this is true of us in so many ridiculous ways. Just ask the women in your lives. Things don't magically happen. And one day your body begins changing and churning, and a voice slithers into your mind with questions about your reality that challenges the assumptions you've always held. Are my parents, my caregivers, not perfect? You know, they actually seem kind of dumb and out of touch a lot of the time. It's like they don't even know what they're doing most of the time. It sounds familiar to some of you because you have kids who say it to you. And you were probably one of the kids who said it to your parents. And then most children, as children should do, will say, I can't wait to grow up and get out of here and be on my own. Being an adult is way easier than being a kid. Right? That slithering voice sounds so convincing because these thoughts are entirely appropriate. And they are necessary to prompt our own development and growth by stirring the dormant seeds deep within, seeds that grow in ways described by Alden Nolan. Quote, "The day the child realizes that all adults are imperfect, he becomes an adolescent. The day he forgives them, he becomes an adult. The day he forgives himself, he becomes wise." End quote. You see, one day we all look back and see that we are no longer in the garden. We are no longer, like it or not, we are no longer children. And those cherubim and that flaming, swirling sword at the east of Eden lets us know there is no going back. The rest of your life is all about making a way in places that vary in degrees of hospitality. Life itself, those of us that have been pregnant, those of us that have accompanied a pregnant person, know that pregnancy itself is risky. Those of us that have given birth, those of us that have witnessed birth, know that it is treacherous, life-threatening, dangerous, and yet we still bring children into this world. And we dedicate ourselves to being parents or in the circle of parenting for a child. And then there's making a living. It's hard. The soil can be unfriendly, hostile sometimes. Every now and then you have to uproot and go somewhere else in the hope that will be a little bit better in another field. Even though there is no going back through the flaming sword and the cherubim, we can bring forward our childlike wonder, our faith that things can work out, and most importantly, our love and togetherness. See, one of the things in that story of the Garden of Eden, God is telling them life is about to get real. Adulting is hard. But they have this relationship, the three of them, Adam, Eve, and God, that continues. It continues on. Nobody's abandoning anybody, but it's going to be different now. You know, your childlike 4-year-old wonder, when you talked to things and no one blinked an eye, sooner or later, people are like, "What are you talking to?" "Well, my imaginary friend or my guardian angel. We need to keep a chair for them at dinner time." Sooner or later, the adults are like, "Well, you know, someone's going to beat you up if you do that in public. So you should probably stop doing that," because there's that concern for acceptance. And so we conform. We demand of our children that they conform to what's expected of them. Now, we at Parkside, we have children in our congregation who have many years left in the garden. Part of our job is to continue to protect that Eden experience for them for as long as they need it, and then to practice wisdom at knowing it's now time to prepare for the leaving. And how do we equip and nurture and maintain relationships, although they will look very different east of Eden than they do in Eden? And we as Christians, as humans, as a community, we face a future of climate disasters. None of us are in denial in this room. All of us have eaten the apple on this one. Our eyes have been opened. And as we continue through this month to discuss our Christianity in relationship to climate change, I ask that we keep this powerful sentiment of this poem central in our adventure. The poem is Alive Together by Liesl Mueller. Speaking of marvels, I am alive together with you. When I might have been alive with anyone under the sun, when I might have been Abelard's woman, or the whore of a Renaissance pope, or a peasant wife with not enough food and not enough love, with my children dead of the plague. I might have slept in an alcove next to the man with the golden nose, who poked it into the business of stars, or sewn a starry flag for a general with wooden teeth. I might have been the exemplary Pocahontas, or a woman without a name weeping in master's bed for my husband, exchanged for a mule, my daughter lost in a drunken bet. I might have been stretched on a totem pole to appease a vindictive god, or left a useless girl child to die on a cliff. I like to think I might have been Mary Shelley in love with the wrong-headed angel, or Mary's friend. I might have been you. This poem is endless. The odds against us are endless. Our chances of being alive together statistically non-existent. Still, we have made it. Alive in a time when rationalists in square hats and hatless Jehovah's Witnesses agree it is almost over. Alive with our lively children who, but for endless ifs, might have missed out on being alive together with marvels and follies and longings and lies and wishes and error and humor and mercy and journeys and voices and faces and colors and summers and mornings and knowledge and tears and chance. I repeat this one phrase. This poem is endless. The odds against us are endless. Our chances of being alive together statistically non-existent. Still, we have made it. We are here, and we are together. Amen.